It's wonderful, actually, sitting here and listening to you talk, because, yours is the most impersonated voice in the business, isn't it?
Oh, yeah,
everybody does.
I can do it.
Can you do it?
Yeah. Hello, my name is Michael Caine. I'm finished yet. I'm not finished yet. Not many people know that. I sound like this bloody moron. My name's Michael Caine. You know where they've got me now? They have me on the birthday cards, you know.
Yes, when you're with job.
It's your birthday today. Not many people know that. Now, they've got me, on the satellite navigation.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in the car, where you say, it's me going, now take the second turn in over and you'll wind up right in the shit. If anybody's got a sat-nav with me giving instructions on it, I should watch out where you go.
Hello everybody, welcome to a joint presentation, a swapcast, if you will, of the Film Gold and Stinking Paws podcast. We're celebrating the life and films of Maurice Joseph Micklewhite. And in case you're thinking, who the hell's that? Well, you're probably not, because you've seen the title of the podcast. He's better known by the name of Michael Caine, and he will be turning 90 on March the 14th. So he's just got to hang on for 2 more weeks. Otherwise, this is going to be another kind of tribute show, which we're hoping it isn't. But we've just had Yoko Ono's 90th birthday. We just had Nina Simone, obviously posthumously, turning 90. So 3 absolute icons. So for those in our 2 audiences who don't know who we are, so I'm Antony Rotunno. I've got 3 podcasts: Glass Onion on John Lennon, Life and Life Only, and Film Gold. My co-host here has 4.
Greedy.
Yeah, which I'll get him to introduce. Anyway, my co-host today, the wonderful podcasting legend, Scott Phipps. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Yeah, we're going to put this out on the Stinking Paws feed, but other listeners may know me as a guest on your show and the Real Britannia podcast, the Rainbow Valley podcast, the Rainbow Valley 60s chart show, and co-host of the Talking Pictures TV podcast.
Oh, yeah, 5. 4.5.
Yeah, keeps me off the streets, mate.
Excellent. I've got to tell you, I'm so looking forward to this, because I know we're both big Michael Caine fans.
We bloody are, absolutely. Yeah.
Probably you even more than me, actually. But he's up there in my, Brando's my top boy. But and in fact, I was prompted to do this by the fact that on Film Gold, we've only ever done film reviews, except we did a Brando special 2 years ago. But the difference is that Brando made something like 40 films, and arguably he phoned in about 15 of those.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whereas Mr. Caine, how many films has he done, Scott?
It's creeping up to the 200, isn't it, I think, because they include these numerous uncredited bit parts in those early 50s things before A Hill in Korea, and IMDb includes a lot of TV plays and things that he appeared in as well. Yeah, 175, I think, is the official IMDb listing, but that's voices as well, in cartoons and stuff like that. So
an incredible thing is he's just about to turn 90, but he's still working. I mean, hasn't he got 2 in the pipeline this year? I think
there's a thing coming out this year called Medieval, and I'm praying to God that it's not his last movie, because it looks absolutely awful. I want him to go out on a bang, because he did this rotten thing on Sky last year called Twist, which was a modern retelling of the Oliver Twist story, and he plays this modern Fagin, and again, absolute crap,
Oh, dear.
So is he phoning these in for the money, his last retirement fund? I don't know, but I'm just hoping that somebody rings him up, Nolan or somebody, and says, look, come on, just do this for me before you decide to put your slippers on, basically.
I suppose it's like a boxer, isn't it? They can never quit while they're ahead. So if you take any boxer like Muhammad Ali, the last few fights were just awful because he just hung on too long. So, yeah,
absolutely.
Right. All right. Yeah, you mentioned your podcast. So we've got Stinking Paws, Real Britannia. Those are film podcasts. Have you ever done any kind of specials like this or tributes, or has it always been straight film reviews?
Pretty much straight film reviews. I mean, Rainbow Valley, which is my 60s documentary, episode 007 was on the birth of the James Bond movies and how Dr. No came about. And I used that as a special on Real Britannia. I slotted that into Real Britannia just because it fitted perfectly because of 60s movies, but British movies. I've done a commentary on Jaws with yourself.
Oh, yeah.
On The Stinking Paws. I've done a documentary on It's a Wonderful Life on Stinking Paws as well. Usual format for me, though, with the movie podcasts is either yourself or my friends, Paul, Charlie, whoever, Stephen, would come on board and we just chat, and it's very informal. This is probably the most structured podcast I've ever done because you do like to be prepared. And it's no bad thing because it makes us, well, it makes my job easier having somebody in the opposite corner that's on the ball, knowing where we're going. And you've thrown this structure out towards me. And I've held my hands up. I wrote my top 10 20 minutes ago. And I'm still not happy with it. It may change over the next 2 hours or so. Yeah. There's things I want to mention. There's things that daren't be mentioned.
Yeah, there will be.
The man's career was just a whole gamut of ups and downs. Some absolutely cracking stuff. There is some absolute turkeys, which we're going to focus on as well. And the man's an icon. What more can I say? You know, he's become a bit of a parody, but he's also one of the biggest icons of the 60s. You know, when people talk about the swinging 60s, he's up there with like Mary Quant and the miniskirt and the mini, you know, and all of those sort of things. It's Michael Caine.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been caned up for the last 2 weeks, and it's watching. I mean, I think I've seen probably 8 or 9 of his films in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Not quite one a night, but he's such a compelling presence, and there's a kind of warmth to him. I mean, there's a dark side to him, and I'm sure we'll get to a lot of the stories as we discuss the films. By the way, just for the listeners, the centerpiece of this is going to be our counting down our top 10 Michael Caine performances, but there's also he's a bit like comfort food in a way. When I see him in a film, I kind of know I'm all right, you know, and there's not going to be too dark, although one of the ones in my list is very dark, but there's something comforting about him in a funny way. I don't know.
You saying that, there's a certain era of Caine movies that I try to avoid. It's the era where he was just taking the money, and the films are not particularly brilliant. We're going to mention most of them as we go along. 10 years, 15 years almost, where it's just like, oh, Michael, what have you done? You know.
He's bought a house. That's what he's done.
Yeah, he did, exactly. And we'll tell that story at some point as well. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. So apart from this top 10 list, got a couple of other things planned. So we'll go through these and then just let the magic happen, as we said.
Okay.
Right, let's start with his upbringing. So he's obviously famously a Cockney. A quick question, actually. Is Cockney now a generic name for anyone from London, or is it a part of London? Is he a Cockney?
He's not a Cockney. He was born 5 minutes down the road from me.
Okay.
St Olave's Hospital in Rotherhithe, and he was born 18 months after my father was born there. So my connection to him, his locality, is pretty strong. You know, he was born literally in the same hospital as my father, round about the same sort of time. But he didn't actually live in Rotherhithe. He lived a little bit further south in Kennington. You know where the Oval cricket ground is, round that way? Famously where Charlie Chaplin was born and brought up. And then during the war, he was evacuated, I think, to Norfolk. And then when he came back, I think they got a prefab somewhere in South London, Camberwell. I think it was Camberwell. A traditional Cockney is born within the sound of Bow Bells. Bow Bells is the other side of the river. It's the East End. But, you know, for sake of ease, technically speaking, you probably could hear the sound of Bow Bells from Rotherhithe on a very quiet day, you know. But
technically, he was reading them, I suppose.
Yeah, technically he's not a Cockney, he's a South Londoner.
Well, it's a bit like, obviously, you know, I have a connection to Liverpool through the Beatles. Scouse used to generally mean very guttural, that sort of, all right there, that kind of guttural Scouse. And a Scouser was probably, I suppose, don't want to get in trouble, but maybe, I don't know, a working class scally from Liverpool. But now they use the word Scouser completely generically for anyone from Liverpool. So I
think that's what's happening with Cockney, like you say.
Yeah. So he did famously have a working class upbringing. You often find in people of that era, when you read their biographies, it's that what's almost become a cliche of the rent man appearing at the door, and the family either hiding behind the sofa or the mother sending the children out to say that she's not in, you know, that kind of thing. That literally happened with him, did it? I mean, according to him. Yeah.
The brilliant thing about Michael Caine is that many years ago he decided to write one of 2 autobiographies. So he told the story exactly how it happened. You know, we're not relying on second or third hand knowledge. And I mentioned this to you off air, that the first of those, which is called What's It All About, came out sort of early to mid 90s. And it's on a par, I would say, with the David Niven autobiographies, which are widely regarded as 2 of the best Hollywood stories there are. And it's very similar, because he's got that Hollywood connection and he's got all the stories that he tells, but also we get a bit of an insight into that background. It wasn't particularly hard. It wasn't a tough upbringing, like if you read like Norman Wisdom's, which is absolutely frightening when you read what he's...
Oh, is it? Wow.
Oh, he was sleeping rough on the street from the age of like 9 years old. It was horrible story, Norman Wisdom's upbringing. And it was only the army that saved him. I think he joined the army at 14 and become a bandsman. And that's how he learned to play all the instruments and become a comedian. But yeah, it was a typical South London rags to riches story almost. I think, what was his first job? Was he like a market porter or something like that, which most people would have been on the docks and stuff like that. It was that sort of thing. He had money in his pocket growing up. He wasn't particularly hard up. It's just the fact, I think, that by the time he became an actor or a well-known actor, it was fairly uncommon for somebody of his background to be where he was.
Yeah.
The birth of the kitchen sink stuff, the Angry Young Man movies opened the doors for working class actors, predominantly in the North originally, obviously. I mean, we're going to get into this, but once you get to Alfie, that's it. He's part of that swinging London scene. And in his upbringing, he's brought into his performances, in those early performances that we know and love.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm on your film shows, we have this running joke that I bring in Beatles references, and it's become...
You've already brought in 3.
I know, it's become a sort of a challenge, but with Michael Caine, I feel like it's entirely appropriate because it fits. I mean, he was from the south of England, I mean, meaning, south of Watford, so to speak.
Yeah.
The Beatles were from the north, but they both had regional, they both probably treated quite similarly, the regional accents. And as you said, it suddenly became, not only did it become acceptable, it became trendy, didn't it, for a while?
Yeah. Was it you that told me, or it might have been Charlie or Stephen, I can't remember, that I think it's a quote from David Bailey, who said that the swinging 60s, as we know it, only really happened to about 200 people.
Yes, that was from Desert Island Discs. And I included that because I had my my dear mother, who's my biggest fan, on the show, on the Glass Onion show. And she was talking about how the 60s was just like any other time if you didn't live in that thing. But then I had Dan Richter, of course, who was famously in 2001 A Space Odyssey. He told me that they did a Royal Albert Hall show and they got Allen Ginsberg to mention it because Allen Ginsberg, I think, he'd been jailed or he'd been deported or something. And Dan said to him, well, while you're on TV being interviewed, can you mention we're doing this Royal Albert Hall thing? And they were expecting just to break even, and they had to turn away thousands of people. Wow. They sold it out. So Dan Richter would say it was thousands. David Bailey said 200, but David Bailey in that interview was quite disparaging. Like he was making jokes about, I think the ad lib, one of them burnt down or it was closed down or something. So you got the sense from that he was a bit disparaging of the 60s. No, Caine and the Beatles and Mary Quant, it was real. It's probably been played up a bit like these things are, but I think there was something real. Obviously we weren't there, but something real in the air, some kind of liberation, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was the sexual revolution, wasn't it? With the pill, 1960, 61, and then you had the Lady Chatterley court case in 60 as well. So basically all those kids, I think I've mentioned this to you before, all those kids that were born when their fathers came home after the war were now teenagers or young 20-year-olds with money in their pocket and money to burn, basically. And what else could they spend it on but fashion and music?
There you go, yeah. All right. Yeah, with his upbringing, so we're sort of saying he had a working class upbringing, but, it wasn't dirt poor. And of course,
working class.
Working class, yeah. And he jokes about, people were saying, oh, people will think you're a Nancy boy if you become an actor and things like that.
Yep.
But then if you compare that to, I don't know, let's say Kenneth Williams for argument's sake.
Just about to say Kenneth Williams.
You're just about to say that, yeah. I mean, if you compare his experience where his father was a barber, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And it basically just not disowned him, but just ignored him and really treated him like he was some freak of nature, because Kenneth Williams obviously was homosexual, but in comparison with Charles Hawtrey and other carry-ons, he was completely overt and outrageous.
That's the
Kenneth
thing. He
Williams
reacted against his father. Yeah, he reacted by just playing up on the whole thing. That was his answer to his father. It was like, well, you don't like it, I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to be really overt about it at the same time.
Yeah,
and that's how the Kenneth Williams persona came about, really. Yeah, because of his father's hatred towards the whole acting profession.
Absolutely. And then Michael Caine's early career, We're going to talk about that masterclass later, which is both enlightening and slightly comic, but we'll get there. So we know his real name was Maurice Micklewhite. Change it to Michael Caine. We all know that.
Caine,
what was going on there?
He got from the Caine Mutiny, didn't he, the film?
Yeah.
One night, when I was just about as near as I ever got to giving up the business, I phoned Josephine Burton and learned that she'd finally got me a job on television with a good speaking part. The play, she told me, was called The Lark by Jean Anouilh, and it was about the life of Joan of Arc. I was to play the small part of Bouduce the guard, who took Joan to Paris to meet the Dauphin. There was one problem, however. I had to become a fully fledged member of Equity, the British Actors' Trade Union. There was already another actor on Equity's list named Michael Scott, my stage name at the time. Josephine said I must change my last name in the next half hour because she wanted to send the contract off that evening. I promised to call her back. I had called her from a phone box in Leicester Square tube station, so I went and sat in Leicester Square, desperately racking my brains. All around were first-run cinemas, and it was as I was looking at the stars' names up in shining lights that I saw the name Humphrey Bogart, one of my all-time favourite actors. The film that he was in at the time was The Caine Mutiny. I looked for a moment and decided that was the one, for several reasons. Caine was short and sounded easy with Michael, and it was a word with which everybody was familiar, particularly those of us who had been through the British school system. The word mutiny in the title also appealed to me, because at that time I was extremely rebellious and angry, but I couldn't call myself Michael Mutiny. There was another reason for my choice. Caine was the brother of Abel, who was cast out of paradise, and I felt a great sympathy with him at the time. I called Josephine back and told her to put me down as Michael Caine.
I think Michael Caine had a good grounding because he probably did up to about 200 bit parts if you include TV and stage, wasn't it? So he learned the tricks in probably the best way you could, which is to not be noticed for years.
Yeah, and also early TV would have been live as well.
Oh,
so
yes.
you think about it, he wouldn't have the opportunity to make any mistakes because the play of the week would be going out live. And there's a lot of uncredited stuff when you look on IMDb, and sometimes it's a blink and you'll miss him, but he's there.
One of the early ones. Do you remember the Mysteries of Edgar Wallace?
Yes.
Have you seen any of those?
Oh,
years ago, yeah. He's in one called Solo for Sparrow.
Yeah.
Doing this absolutely atrocious Irish accent. Which, funny enough, was in 1962, which is 2 years before he got his break. I don't know if we'll be mentioning this because I don't know your top 10. You don't know my top 10. Let's make that clear. But I was watching the Cider House Rules, which didn't make my top 10. A little spoiler. And people were saying he had a really good New England accent. I was thinking, not really. He just sounds like Michael Caine putting on an American accent. What do you think? Can you remember that?
Two things Michael Caine cannot do, and I love him as an actor. I absolutely adore him as you do. He can't do an American accent, and he cannot cry. Every time I see Michael Caine cry on screen, I laugh because it just looks like, I don't know, somebody shoved an onion up his nose or something. It's that really over-exaggerated, childlike crying, and bless him, I love the man to bits, but it stands out. You'll probably be looking out for it now every time you see Michael Caine cry on screen. I think so, yeah. It's just excruciating. But American accents, I mean, Hurry Sundown, he's awful. The accent he puts on in that. I've only ever seen Cider House Rules once. Did he win the Oscar, Best Supporting Oscar for that?
Yeah.
He did, didn't he? Yeah.
It could be a bit of a pat on the back. He had got one already for Hannah and
Sisters. It was Best Supporting Actors in both cases, wasn't it?
Yes.
And then there's this really diabolical Steven Seagal movie where, again, I think he puts on a Canadian accent. I'm not too sure. But if he sticks to being Michael Caine, that's what he does best. But yeah, it has always sort of stood out for me when he tries to do an American accent, unfortunately, because I know and love him as the cheeky South Londoner,
Yeah. I find with him, we're saying full disclosure, we both love the guy and we think he's a great actor. So if we make fun of him, he makes fun of himself, let's face it. And in fact, I'm going to say off the bat, we haven't put the clips in yet. But I'm probably going to start the show with that clip of him on Parkinson doing an impression of himself.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is absolute gold, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, what I find, his mannerisms are so Michael Caine that when he's playing a New England doctor, whatever it is, in Cider House Rules or whatever he's doing in that Steven Seagal, what was he doing in that Steven Seagal film? With that jet black hair that would shame, Roger Moore and Ringo Starr, wouldn't it?
We're going to talk about the 3 ages of Caine. It's probably a good point to sort of mention this. We've touched on the early stuff before Zulu. That we would say is the first age is pre-Zulu. There may be more than 3 ages, actually, mate. I would then say that there is a period from Zulu to about Get Carter, 71, 72, where he is untouchable. Throughout the 70s and most of the 80s, apart from things like The Man Who Would Be King and a couple of other standout performances, that is the worst period in Michael Caine history as far as I'm concerned, because there's a lot of turkeys and we're going to mention most of them from that period. There then hits another sweet spot, early 90s, where he's at that age where Hollywood is sort of recognising him as a bit of an elder statesman and treating him with the respect that he should have had continuously all the way through. And there's this resurgence that goes through, I think, from 1990, let's say. I'll check the dates as we go along. I'm going to say you're going to agree with me there, mate. I'm pretty sure that's the sort of 3 ages we're going to talk about.
Yeah, pretty much. Obviously, there's a few within the bad period. You've got stuff like Hannah and Her Sisters, which I think he was genuinely brilliant. Although it's not really a big part. That's obviously very much a Woody Allen film, as all Woody Allen films are, really.
Yeah.
He actually credits Jack Nicholson and the film Blood and Wine, which was 96, which I watched the other day and didn't really consider top tier, nowhere near.
No.
Considering it's Jack Nicholson and Michael Caine, then Jennifer Lopez was in there as well. He credited Jack Nicholson, because they had so much fun making that, as sort of revitalising him, I think. I think that happened with Connery as well. He went off the boil, and then he made Untouchables, talking of terrible accents.
Yes.
Supposed to be Irish, I think. But
he can't do an Irish one either, that's right. Yeah.
No, he doesn't have to, does he? He's a Lithuanian submarine pilot.
Submarines, my favourite's Highlander, where he's a Spanish, Russian Scotsman or something. I can't remember.
Exactly. Yeah, but it is, it can go that way. I mean, again, if we're talking about 60s musicians, McCartney, Bowie, Dylan, they all had a terrible 80s. And then the 90s, they kind of found their feet. So it's funny that Michael Caine's almost like a rock star, really, isn't he?
He is a rock star.
He's had the rock star. He is a rock star. He's had the rock star life. He's had a bit of luck along the way, which he admits.
Well, we haven't mentioned he also had a top 10 record named after him as well in the 80s.
Oh, it's madness.
Madness, yeah.
My name is Michael Caine, yeah. Oh, should we, I was going to do this later, but should we just clear this up now? The 2 famous catchphrases, not a lot of people know that, and my name is Michael Caine. Where do they come from? Are they real? Did he ever actually say them?
There's a story, and I may be completely wrong on this, but it was Peter Sellers that did not a lot of people know that.
Oh, he did an impression of him, right?
I think so. I think he threw in this catchphrase, not a lot of people know that, and it just stuck.
You never said, did you, not many people know that? I mean,
No, Peter Sellers said that, because I'm always full of information and facts. If you mention something, I said, and Peter always had the new gadgets, right?
Yes.
So he was the first one to have an answer machine. I called him one day, he wasn't in, and there was me saying, my name is Michael Caine. I just want you to know that Peter Sellers is not in. Not many people know that. He invented that, not many people know that. Yeah. And then everyone who rang him, they got me saying, not many people know that.
Mince pie, front mince pie. It got it. Yeah, right. Do you know about that? Oh, there's not many people know that.
What's that?
This is my Michael Caine impression. Do you know that it takes a man in a tweed suit 5.5 seconds to fall from the top of Big Ben to the ground? Now, there's not many people know that.
I think it then got picked up by someone like Mike Yarwood, all the famous impressionists of the 70s, carried on with it. And then I'm sure Michael Caine brought out a trivia. I put his name to a trivia book called Not a Lot of People Know That. I remember seeing it in the late 70s, early 80s. Just one of those little Christmas stocking fillers, with some fun facts.
Well, I've got a funny feeling. I don't think I was dreaming, but I watched Educating Rita about 2 weeks ago. I'm sure it wasn't him. Someone in the cast says not a lot of people know that. And I'm sure it must have been a joke. It's Willie Russell, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, more
sure
than
it was
likely.
a joke. Yeah,
more than likely.
Yeah.
And what was the other catchphrase you said?
My name is Michael Caine. I don't.
Well, that's it. That's in the Madness song.
Yeah, but where did they get it from? Do you think?
Well, he says it, doesn't he? In the mic, it's him.
For the song, he put his voice.
He says, "My name is Michael. My name is Michael Caine," doesn't it? And then they sing the. Yeah.
It brings to mind the famous trivia question: which film contains the line "Play it again, Sam"? Come on, Scott.
Well, it's not Casablanca.
It's not Casablanca, no. It's actually Moonraker.
Is it?
Yeah. I think Roger Moore's, I think they're in like a symphony hall and he's fighting upstairs with one of the henchmen and he chucks him through this glass. I can't remember what it
Venice,
is. Like
isn't he? Yeah.
And he goes, play it again, Sam. Michael, you're a wonderful actor. I just always claim I'm doing Rob Brydon doing...
That's
Roger
it.
Moore.
That's the only way to get away.
I'm not doing Roger himself, yeah.
One Sauvignon Blanc.
Yes.
To link with the grilled scallops. The caviar is from Iran.
Oh,
Enjoy.
Yeah.
stupendo. Iranian caviar.
Please, go first.
No. Please, you go first.
Well, before I do, Scaramanga, why don't I turn them that way? In which case, should you have interfered with my...
My country, it is always traditional that the nearest scallop is served to the guest.
Where I come from, it is accustomed to proffer the larger scallop to the guest.
There's a real danger. I mean, we did this on Stinking Paws a few weeks ago. We had a bit of a Sean Connery tribute to the great man. It was the anniversary of his death. And it just developed into Sean Connery impersonations every 5 minutes. Every now and again someone going, yes. You can't stop yourself doing it.
No.
But yeah, the catchphrases and the lines will come up as we go through our top 10. It'd be impossible to do them in your own voice. I guarantee it.
Absolutely, yeah. And some of the stories will come up as well. It'll all happen.
Yeah.
Right, are you ready, mate?
Yeah, who's going to go first with this top 10?
All right, what we'll do is I'll do 10, you do 10, you do 9, I do 9.
Okay.
Obviously, certain films will come up. I've got a fairly good idea of a few that will be higher on your list. Don't tell us, but do you have an idea what my number one probably is?
I've got an idea what it is, but then you just said something that has sort of thrown me a bit. I will give you a clue as to the general makeup of my top 10.
Okay.
My love for the 60s is evident within this top 10. And I've selected one movie, I would say, where it is just almost a cameo, a little bit of a longer cameo.
We're going to do honourable mentions later. I'll just mention literally a couple of high-profile films that objectively I probably would be in my top 10, such as Children of Men.
Uh-huh.
If you've never seen that, on YouTube, you can just watch the Michael Caine scenes. He is brilliant. He's a 60s pot-smoking hippie.
Yes.
And he actually based it on John Lennon. And should we just very quickly tell a John Lennon story here for my other audience?
Because this is all part of the deal, isn't it?
There's a story that in 1965, Michael was in Caine for, I think, Zulu must have been exhibited. And John Lennon, I don't know what John Lennon, surely Hard Day's Night wasn't at Cannes, it can't have been. But John Lennon was there, and the two of them bonded, and they spent 2 or 3 days getting pissed together and had a really nice time. And there was a point where they were upstairs in one of the rooms and they both needed to urinate. And Michael Caine found a toilet and John Lennon decided to piss off the balcony.
Yeah.
Which he had previous form of, because in Hamburg in 1962 he pissed off a balcony, and the story went that he pissed on some nuns. What actually happened was he pissed off a balcony after an all-night session on a Sunday morning, and there happened to be some nuns in the reefer bar. Anyway, and apparently Michael Caine said, John, you're getting it all over the curtains. And John Lennon said, oh, they're fucking rich. They can pay for it, or something like that. Anyway, yeah, Children of Men. The other one was the Dark Knight, the Batman films. I'm not mad on them. And
Batman Begins, very close to coming into my top 10.
Right, okay.
I just loved his interpretation of Alfred.
Right,
he played it as Michael Caine. He didn't play it as a posh butler. He played it as Michael Caine. And that was very close to being in my top 10. In fact, it would have been number 10 had I not have selected what I've just selected. I'll say it's 11, just to be on the safe side.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we said we'll do honourable mentions and turkeys afterwards. So unless you ready?
Unless they crop up naturally, mate, yes. Unless they crop up along the way, yeah.
Are you ready? Here we go.
You're number 10. Yes, please. Yeah.
Right, I'm going for 1982, Sidney Lumet, Death Trap, which is a film I have some affection for.
I thought that would be in there because of our conversation around Sleuth.
That's Sleuth, yes.
I know you do adore this movie. I've seen it a couple of times. It's not one I go back to enough. I may actually go back to it again now. I remember the premiere on a Sunday night on ITV and the big controversy about the gay kiss and all of that stuff. And there's a lot of twists and turns in there as far as I remember.
Yeah, it's very much Son of Sleuth. And Michael Caine does a great job of playing almost the Laurence Olivier, not as over the top as Olivier, but he's suddenly playing the older guy, and it's only 10 years later. Christopher Reeve is very good. With these top tens, you're always thinking, is it heart over head? And objectively, I don't think it's a great film. But funnily enough, it's based on an Ira Levin play, and it's directed by Sidney Lumet, so it's got form. But it's pretty absurd. I mean, you just don't really buy him and Christopher Reeve as this gay couple. And the story is, without giving the whole story away, he's a failed playwright who had a very big play once upon a time. And he's got this very, very jumpy, neurotic, nervous wife, played by Diane Cannon.
Diane Cannon, isn't it? Yeah,
Diane Cannon. Right, and what happens is that Christopher Reeve writes a play, which is called Death Trap. Michael Caine invites him over and tells the wife they're going to kill him and steal the play.
Yeah.
What actually happens is you think they've killed him, but it's a little ruse whereby the wife gets a shock and dies of, I guess, a heart attack. And they're these two gay lovers. And it's very ridiculous, but it's sort of Son of Sleuth, which gives it some credibility. So that's my number 10.
My number 10 is probably going to be the briefest we actually talk about a movie, because it is the one that is the extended cameo as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
If ever Michael Caine was born to play a part, this was it. My top 10 is not necessarily great performances or favourite performance, but this one stands out for me because it's inspired casting and he takes it in the spirit it was intended. It's Austin Powers' Goldmember. Yes, he plays Nigel Powers, Austin's dad, right? And it just turns up in the suit, and they give him the dodgy English crooked teeth.
Yes.
Same as his son, same as Mike Myers, you know. And whereas Mike Myers is "oh, behave," is all that sort of groovy baby sort of voice, Michael Caine comes out as Michael Caine. And if you get the chance to find these two particular clips, mate, of soundbite, if you could find them and put them in, there's one bit, and I had this as a ringtone for years. He says,
"Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Oh, put the guns down. Is this the first day on the job or something? Look, this is how it goes. You attack me one at a time, and I knock you out with a single punch, okay? Go. Judo, come on.
Oh, he's good.
Judo, come on. Do you know who I am? Have you any idea how many anonymous henchmen I've killed over the years? And look at you, you haven't even got a name tag. You've got no chance. Why don't you just fall down? Go on, son."
And there's a scene where he meets Mini-Me, and Mini-Me's stark naked. And he describes Mini-Me's penis as like a baby's arm hanging out of a pram holding an apple. I'm sure that's what he says. Not his best performance, but at the time, he was having fun, because he could afford to pick and choose what he wanted, and he was in demand. And there's another movie coming up later on my list that also exemplifies that as well.
All right, you're number 9.
My number 9, I made a mistake, but Batman Begins is number 9. On my list, I did keep it in. Right, the reasoning behind this, as I did sort of hint at, I'm not a massive Christopher Nolan fan. Don't particularly like Interstellar. Haven't seen Tenet because I've got no inclination to see it. The Batman movies, I loved what he did. I loved the darkness of them and the way that a lot of the essence of some of the darker graphic novels and comics was kept. And as I just sort of hinted at briefly, his performance as Alfred, you can believe that he is just like an ex-soldier, probably fought in the war or Korea. It would have been Korea, wouldn't it, because of Michael Caine. And he becomes this father figure to Christian Bale, and that sort of relationship becomes really believable. And again, it's at that point in his career where, do you know what, he probably would have got top billing because, you know, over Christian Bale, because it's Sir Michael Caine at this point, you know, it is acting royalty appearing in a comic book movie.
Yeah.
Just stands out for me. It's the perfect casting. I would sort of look back at some of the other, you know, character actors that have played Alfred. You know, Michael Gough was great as Alfred. I think Jeremy Irons played him in one, didn't he? One of the newer ones. And it's Andy Serkis in the brand new one, as far as I'm aware. But no, for me, yeah, perfect casting. And again, takes it in the spirit that it was intended. I think this is going to be a theme going through some of the stuff that we touch upon as we talk over the next hour or so, mate.
Yeah. Didn't he say in one of his memoirs that Nolan actually rang him up? Nolan wanted him for the part, or
more than likely. I could believe that.
Yeah.
He would have been number one choice, you know. And then he's appeared in every single Nolan film, hasn't he, pretty much? Even in Dunkirk, he's the voice on the radio in Dunkirk.
Oh, right. I'm not a big Nolan fan. I thought Inception was absolute crap, to be
fair. Exactly. I'm not a massive
really
fan.
Bad. There's so much better people at the moment. Anyway, this is my number 9. Yeah, you're probably going to be a bit disappointed by this, but
Okay.
it would have been higher, but it's only only because of the competition. Number 9 is the Ipcress file from 1965.
It's in mine, top 10. It's higher.
Yeah, it's higher. I thought it would be. I don't know. There's nothing bad about it. I thought it fell away a little bit towards the end. I haven't seen it for ages, but the whole, what's the name of the character? Harry Palmer, right?
Harry Palmer, yeah.
Which I think was something to do with Harry Saltzman.
Our first problem with Ipcress was the fact that the book had been written in the first person and the narrator had no name. One evening we were sitting around discussing this when Harry said this spy was to be the antithesis of James Bond, a very ordinary bloke, someone who could mingle unnoticed in a crowd, and who should have an ordinary, boring name. "What's the dullest first name we can give him?" asked Harry. Charlie Casher, his partner on this film, myself, and a couple of other people sat there, meditating about this for a while, and then, without thinking, I blurted out, "Harry is a pretty dull name." All eyes turned to Harry, who, for all his friendship and kindness, had a ferocious temper. He stared straight at me for a moment and then started to laugh. "Let's call him Harry then," he said. "My real name's Herschel." Audible sighs of relief hissed round the room as the danger passed. Now we needed a surname. We all started to go through the dullest names we could think of, Smith, Brown, Jones, etc. None of them felt right. Finally, Harry said, "The dullest person I ever met was called Palmer." So that was it. The character was christened Harry Palmer. It was during one of these Sunday night sessions that Harry hit on another idea for the character. I'm short-sighted in real life and always wear glasses. During the meal, Harry kept staring at me and finally remarked, "I always hate it in films when actors who do not normally wear glasses are made to wear them and don't know how to handle them. You," he said to me, "know exactly what to do with them. It will also help to make the guy look more ordinary." Remember, Harry was the co-producer of the Bond series at that time with Cubby Broccoli, and as Ipcress was his own production, he wanted to get away as far as possible from the Bond image.
The whole idea of the anti-James Bond with glasses and cooking is great. I love all that. And he's brilliant in it, and I like the boss. I know it's going to be higher up your list, but why don't you just talk about it? Do you want to talk about it now?
As I said earlier, my top 10 is heavily laden with 60s Caine performances. Ipcress File, as you say, was the anti-Bond, this French cooking, glasses-wearing, anonymous spy, you know, not the big brash womanizer, although he is a bit of a womanizer in this when you do watch it, you know.
Yeah.
This whole movie screams the 60s. You cut it in half and it's got the 60s running through it, from that very end bit that you're not particularly fond of, you know, with the whole hypnotist, you know, the hallucinations and the drug and all that sort of stuff at the end. The use of Dutch angles throughout the movie. Every camera shot is unique in this movie because the director has filmed through something or under something or around something or above. It's never a standard camera shot where everybody is centrally placed. There is something askew in every single shot of this movie. And that is the highlight of the movie for me, is the visual effects, the cinematography. And Michael Caine just ties it all together for me. Not a big fan too much of the sequels. Diminishing returns as far as I'm concerned. They get progressively worse, and then he did make a comeback in the 90s as Harry Palmer. I never watched those either.
Preserve the memory instead.
Exactly. Why would you want to see an aging Harry Palmer? It's a bit like Indiana Jones again this year, you know. 80-year-old Indy is going to be a bit dodgy, isn't it? But to me, because of my love of the 60s and 60s Caine in particular, I won't tell you where it is, but it is certainly higher up than number 9 in my list.
Sure. All right, I've got a couple more things to say. With James Bond, I wonder when they were making this, I don't think the James Bond films had got absurd by then, because they'd only made, I mean, Thunderball was the 4th one, and that came out the same year as this. But obviously the whole thing with James Bond, the super spy, he goes to any hotel in the world. Ah, Mr. Bond, we've got your, you know, the idea you're supposed to be, you know,
not that undercover,
agent. No, especially a secret agent. The other thing, it is very 60s, because the thing you got to remember about the 60s, this is obviously pre-psychedelia by a couple of years.
Yeah.
As we said earlier, there was a very normal world going on.
Exactly.
And I was going to tell you this. I think I was sort of joking almost, but when I was a kid and I got into the whole 1967 psychedelia idea, I guess I was about probably 13, 14 when I started becoming a Lennon Beatles fan. You know, I used to say to my mum, oh, you know, when they played the Wimbledon tennis final, did they all wear like multicolored clothes and stuff? And she was like, no. In the FA Cup final, do they all come out wearing kaftan?
Loom pants, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I was serious. I don't know.
It was hats and overcoats, mate. Obviously, it was just hats and overcoats.
And the idea of Harry Palmer I love the scene in the supermarket where he meets his boss and they're, what's he shopping for? Do they mention any food?
I can't remember. They've both got the baskets, haven't they?
Yeah.
We decided to have Harry Palmer shopping in a supermarket and pushing his own trolley full of groceries. Here was territory that Bond, brave though he was, would never have dared to tread. At this point, one or two of the fainter hearts started to demur. Maybe we were making this Palmer guy just a bit too much of a wimp, but Harry told us not to worry. He would have Palmer fighting a duel with his boss using the trolleys as weapons.
He was looking for something quite exotic, wasn't he? Some sort of fruit or something. I can't remember.
Maybe, or
because he was cooking whatever it was, this amazing meal. And didn't they actually bring out a Harry Palmer cookbook at the time? Len Dayton actually wrote a Harry Palmer cookbook, didn't he? I'm sure.
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't rewatch this. Maybe if I'd rewatched it, it might come higher, but I very much like it anyway. All right, number 8. Are you ready for this?
You're number 8, yes, sir.
2009, back to his roots, Harry Brown.
Okay.
Watching it the other night, I realised this is the English equivalent of Gran Torino. Have you seen that Clint Eastwood film?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Where the OAP is not taking any more shit. You know what I mean?
I've only seen it once. I loved it. I don't know why I've not gone back to it. I think, personally, for me, the hype over it put me off a wee bit. And people were hyping it up, I think, for the wrong reasons. They weren't hyping it up for his performance. It was just because of the violence and the gang sort of storyline and all of that lot. I must go back to it. Yeah, but sorry, mate, carry on.
I watched it about a week ago, and I did think it was very good. It's very gritty. And I think what Michael Caine has, you know, we could make fun of certain mannerisms he has, but he would probably tell you acting's all in the eyes. And he does have that gift. There's something in his eyes. And when he looks angry, it can occasionally look a bit comic, but in this film it doesn't, you know.
Yeah.
And he's also got that thing of, you know, he's obviously was already an old man, but he's got that lethargy about him, and that, because I'd forgotten some of the plot actually. I think they fought in Northern Ireland, him and his mate.
That's it.
And his mate gets murdered by these youngsters.
Yeah.
Who obviously, I don't know if they're on crack or something. You know, there's obviously drugs going around. But it's that Michael Caine back to his roots, and it's just the idea of him being back in that area was kind of romantic to me, I suppose.
Yeah, I must go back to that myself, actually, because I only ever saw it when it first came out. So perhaps that will go up in my estimation now in the passing of time, mate. I'll certainly give it another go. Yeah.
I think you would enjoy it. And, you know, joking aside, I think this on a double bill with Gran Torino would be brilliant, because you've got Clint Eastwood and Michael Caine, like I said, playing very similar roles, but very convincingly. Did you like Gran Torino?
I love Gran Torino, actually.
Good,
yes.
Yeah. Very good. All right, you're number 8, I think we're up to.
Number 8, an extended cameo in this particular case. We're going back to the 80s, British movie. I'm surprised so far in our conversation we haven't mentioned Bob Hoskins.
Oh, yeah.
Similarities of, you know, acting styles and performances and things like that. And my number 8 is Mona Lisa.
Oh, yes, I love that.
Yeah, because it's very rare when we actually go through this 2 lists and the honourable mentions and everything we're going to be talking about. It's going to be very rare that you find Michael Caine playing a right nasty bastard.
There's obviously one which we'll get to later, but we won't mention it now. No.
It's not something he ever gravitated towards. And in Mona Lisa, he plays a right nasty bastard. And I rewatched it middle of last year for only the second or third time in about 20 years. And we reviewed it on Real Britannia. And I want this to be higher up on my list. It's certainly in the top 20 of my all-time favourite movies now, possibly top 10. But because there's so much wealth of Michael Caine goodness coming up, I had to put it in somewhere. So I sort of selected, for the sake of this experiment, this is number 8.
Okay.
Because it's refreshing. It was unnerving to see him as such a nasty bastard as well. Because it's like, oh, hang on, you're Michael Caine. You're not supposed to do that. Yeah. But he does it so well. And it's just intimidating Bob Hoskins and Kathy Tyson and all those guys, you know, and that storyline that goes on. It's a great movie. It's typical Film 4 production from the mid-80s, handmade film. George Harrison, there's your connection. There you go, mate. I brought him in for you. And I love that little era. It was an exciting time for British film, the early 80s, because we started getting a bit of funding to make movies again, because we'd had a shit sort of 20 years up to that point, 15 years or so, where British films weren't winning any awards. They were seen as a bit of a joke. And along comes Handmade Films and Film 4 and revitalises the whole genre, the whole industry. And that sits there towards the top of the tree for me amongst all of those. Just because it is a unique performance from him, or a fairly unique performance from him.
Yep. A lot of people already know this, obviously, but George Harrison started Handmade Films and famously financed Life of Brian.
Mm-hmm.
Came out in 79, but I guess it was about 78. They'd already written the script. They'd filmed all of it, most of it, and then they got rejected for obvious reasons, I suppose, although I don't agree with it. And George Harrison financed it because he said, I wanted to see the film. That's a generic Beatles accent. That's any of the four of them.
That could have been Ringo, mate. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, it's more George and John. George and John's Paul, sort of this. Paul's like, it's great. You know.
Oh, it's like having them in the room.
Yeah, or someone else in the room. Yeah. Mona Lisa, the only reason it's not on my top 10 is just I slanted more towards his starring roles. That's the only reason. I love that film as well. And he is convincing. I think he's, like I say, the film that's definitely at the business end of both of our lists, he's even nastier. But this one, I mean, I'm a great Bob Hoskins fan as well. So, the only reason it's not there is just because it's not a big role, that's all.
It's a top 10, mate, exactly. You can't fit everything in. So.
Yeah, there you go. All right, you're number 7.
Oh, well, this is definitely on your list, and I'm convinced it's higher up.
Good.
But you're going to have to talk about it with me now. It's Sleuth.
Oh, okay.
Yours is much higher, isn't it? I know it's much higher.
I might hold back a tiny bit now.
Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do. What we'll say is, my number 7 is Sleuth, and we will save the conversation until it appears on your list. How about
all right.
Okay. We'll take your number 7 instead, then.
All right, my number 7. See, we're going to fall into this trap now.
Yeah.
My number 7 is The Italian Job. Clearly.
A little bit higher, but I'm happy to talk about that now.
All right, let's talk about it now. I always felt with this film, I love it. It's great. I watched a documentary years ago. It must have been some making of or something. And the original script had these sort of themes of, patriotism and xenophobia. I think one of the things that convinces Noel Coward to do it is something to do with the Italians and Fiat and everything. So it was that interesting bit of that. And then they made the decision to turn it into a caper, which I'm perfectly happy with. And in fact, I dug out the DVD. I'd forgotten I had it. And I listened to a very good audio commentary with the producer, who weirdly enough also produced, Blade Runner, and what's the other one he did? It wasn't Alien. It was something like that. Or Deer Hunter. Okay. This very posh English guy called Michael something. I don't remember his name. He did, Italian Job, Deer Hunter, and Blade Runner. So I really got to appreciate it. I feel it was sort of a bit betwixt and between, that was all. But you go for it. What do you think? What could you possibly say?
I said earlier, didn't I, that what particular movie was it? I just said that screams the 60s. I can't remember what it was.
Ipcress File.
Ipcress File. I said, so does this. Even more so. It's a comfort movie for me in a way because it's one that was always on the TV every bank holiday, every Easter, every Christmas, whatever it was. And you'd always find yourself watching it. Even if it was halfway through, you'd have to watch it. It'd be like The Great Escape, that sort of like comfort movie that you knew things were well in the world if The Italian Job was on. And I watch it quite consistently. Not every year, every couple of years, I'll just pop it on. I generally tend to watch it round about Christmas because it just gives me that feeling of like Christmas is past, and it's like Italian Job needs to be on at that time of year. And I was quite surprised that I brought it to the table for the Stinking Paws for a review about 4 or 5 years ago. And Paul, my co-host, hadn't seen it since he was a kid. So we're going back like 30, 40 years almost. I said, oh yeah, great, The Italian Job. I love that movie. He hated it. With adult eyes, he said, it's laughable. He just couldn't get into the spirit of it watching it as an adult. But for me, who has watched it consistently throughout my entire life and cherished it and loved it, I couldn't see anything wrong with it. I just totally embraced the whole 60s vibe, the Quincy Jones soundtrack, Matt Monroe at the beginning, the E-Type Jags, the Minis, Rossano Brazzi, all of these things pieced together to make not the perfect heist movie, because I know you're a big lover of heist movies, but the perfect caper heist movie, if you like, very tongue-in-cheek, very self-aware of what it's trying to achieve. Amazing side cast, as you say. There's Noel Coward as a cameo, but then you've got people like John LeMessurier and Benny Hill, and all of those guys that are in this as well. Fred Emney's literally a silent cameo. And Michael Caine, I don't want to say he was first choice for this, because I think Terence Stamp might have been.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but I can't see anybody else playing him, because if you think when this was made, which was the tail end of the 60s, and it's almost the Summer of Love sort of era, it is overblown. And it goes back to that thing that we said, that not everybody was walking around Carnaby Street with big floppy hats, loom pants and platform soles or whatever with flowers in their hair. You know, when he comes out of prison and he's, you know, he goes to the tailors, and the tailor says to him, you know, you still wearing that? He said, well, that's what I went in prison with, you know, and he's oh, dear Lord, you know, and he's like trying to adjust the lapels and, you know, get him all suited up to suit the era that he's come out of prison to. As is typical of my list here, it's not the best Michael Caine performance, not the best Michael Caine film, but I love it. It just has that appeal to me. And I'll say, I think it's more of a nostalgia sort of comfort type thing for me.
Well, I was saying earlier, there is something comforting about him. You know, obviously there are nasty films, but I watched Pulp, which is not a great film, but there's something about him. You know, he's just got that star quality. I would say Noel Coward, amazing. I love the shots of the Alps, brilliant. I like the Italian. Obviously, I'm half Italian.
Yep.
The chaos of the traffic jam, because it's just the best place to start a traffic jam is Italy. If you want to just have loads of people kind of waving their hands around and screaming and shouting about it, you know, it's perfect in that sense. Maybe the reason it's not higher on the list, it almost seemed a bit too easy for Michael. And that's probably a testament to what a good actor he is.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose whenever you see him playing a Cockney, I'm not talking about Alfie, I'm sort of subsequently, it almost seems too easy. That's probably why it's not higher, you know?
This is why I said that things like when he tries to do an American accent seem to jar a little, because it's not natural to him. It's not how you envision Michael Caine. You envision Alfie, you envision the Italian Job, Charlie Croker, you envision Harry Brown, you know, all of those South London characters. So, yeah, perhaps that's what it is, mate. Yeah,
it could be, yeah. And I haven't seen it that many times either. I've probably only seen it 3-4 times. So
you need to multiply that 10 times, mate, before you get a real appreciation for it.
All right, we'll come back when he turns 100. We'll come back.
I'll probably hate it by now. I'll be sick of it.
All right, who's next? Is it my 6 now? Have you done your 7?
Well, my 7 was Sleuth, and we're going to talk about that in a second.
Okay, so it's my 6, isn't it? All right. This is the only, I think it's the only supporting actor role in the top 10, in fact. As I told you, I slanted more towards leading roles, but Hannah and Her Sisters. I'm a big Woody Allen fan. Obviously, you know, his private life, whatever was proved and not proved, is very sketchy. I separate the two. I mean, okay, I don't sit around watching reruns of Jim Will Fix It. Let me make that clear.
Exactly, with Gary Glitter on the stereo.
That won't mean anything to our American friends listening. But I think Woody Allen, I think he's a bit like McCartney in a way. He's a compulsive, as McCartney is a compulsive songwriter, Woody Allen almost can't do anything else with his time. Leaving aside the rumours, yes, he just makes films all the time. I think he's that much of a neurotic person. Obviously, he has been in this long relationship with Sun Yi. But other than that, I think the only thing that makes sense to him is making films. And he makes too many, you know, arguably in the last 20 years, the only thing of note really that's been top tier has been maybe Match Point or what's the one about Paris?
Yeah, the musical one. The one with Owen Wilson.
Yeah, I think that was Midnight in Paris.
Midnight in Paris, was that it?
Then he made one called To Rome with Love, which I quite liked.
What he was doing up until recently, I don't know if he's still doing it. He made a film a year, and I don't think he's actually kept that momentum now. But for a long period throughout 80s through the 90s, and I think there was a 40-year run, I think they worked out. He produced a film every single year, you know, which is incredible. Yeah, and not all of them were brilliant, and not all of them got recognised, did they, mate? And this one did, thankfully. Not necessarily because of Woody Allen itself, but when you look at the cast in this as well, it's an amazing cast list. It's from Max von Sydow to Maureen O'Sullivan to Carrie Fisher.
Diane Wiest
is in it, you know, and she's brilliant in it, you know. That's the thing, because he had that cachet at the time before the scandal that everybody wanted to work with him. That was the thing. You have to be in a Woody Allen film. You're not classed as an actor, predominantly.
Yeah. And I mean, from everything from probably about Annie Hall, I mean, even before then, I like some of the early stuff. It's great. Let's say from Annie Hall for about 10 years, he was really taken seriously.
Yes, absolutely.
And Hannah and Her Sisters is 86, and I think it's just a masterpiece. I meant to rewatch it. There were a few that I just didn't get to, like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. I wanted to watch to see if it was good because I saw it at the cinema in 1988 and I hadn't seen it since. Yeah, Woody Allen, he'd gone to start doing dramas. Annie Hall's technically a rom-com, I suppose, but it had a bit of drama. Manhattan had a bit of drama. And Michael Caine's just brilliant and definitely not doing that much.
Nothing. He does nothing in this film.
He does nothing, but he's obviously doing it. He's doing what the role requires. And it's such a brilliant relationship in the film, Mia Farrow and Michael Caine as this married couple. And she's kind of strong and fragile at the same time. She was so good at that, Mia Farrow, wasn't she?
Mm.
And he's not doing a lot. And
I just remember him walking around in the background just wearing a jumper pouring wine. Oh, that's all I remember him from this movie doing.
I think he does some voiceover. Again, I didn't rewatch it. I wish I had, but I think there's some voiceover of Michael Caine. I could be wrong about that. The hilarious thing, I mean, he got on very well with Woody Allen. He said Woody Allen was absolutely fine. But Woody Allen was directing him in a love scene with Woody Allen's real wife. Was it even in their bedroom?
Really? What, in Woody Allen's own bedroom?
They shoot some in Woody Allen's apartment, or have I got that wrong? Listeners, write in, please.
Excellent, if that's
I'm sure I read that.
How bizarre, how twisted.
Woody's films have such an air of reality that people often ask if you ad-lib most of the dialogue. Of course, the opposite is true. The dialogue, which is written by Woody, is carved in stone, unless you can come up with something on the spur of the moment that is much better than the material he has spent months perfecting, which is highly unlikely. In Hannah and Her Sisters, I play a man who is married to Mia Farrow, yet seduces her sister, played by that gifted actress and lovely woman, Barbara Hershey. Mia's mother in the film was played by her real mother, Maureen O'Sullivan, the first and most gorgeous Jane that I ever saw in a Tarzan movie. In the film, Mia and I have children, and these were played by her real children, and the flat that we lived in the film was Mia's real apartment. One day, I wound up doing a love scene in bed with Mia in her own bedroom and being directed by her lover. This was nerve-wracking enough, but got even worse when I looked up during the rehearsal to find our ex-husband, Andrei Previn, watching us from the other side of the bedroom. He had come to visit the children.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm going to rewatch that one. All right, you're number 6.
We've already spoke about my number 6, unfortunately. It's the Ipcress File. The Ipcress File is at 6, and we spoke at length about that, and I'll just reiterate that I think it's the whole combination, not only of Michael Caine creating an iconic character, but also the cinematography and the direction of the movie and the screaming 60s-ness of it, basically.
Yeah, just one final comment, actually, I didn't get to earlier. All that psychedelic stuff, I think with those old films, it's the same when they delve into psychology. There's a couple of Hitchcock. There's obviously Marnie. There's another one he made with Gregory Peck.
Spellbound, yes.
Had that Salvador Dali.
Yeah, Spellbound.
For some reason, I don't think in the past, in older films, they got that. I think it's maybe the advantage of technology now.
Yeah.
You can create better. I mean, obviously, Apocalypse Now is about 10, whatever years, 15 years later than that. That kind of thing has improved with age, so that probably marked it down a bit. All right, you're number 5, mate.
Did you want to take a break, did you say, at this point?
Oh, yeah, sorry, yes. No, what we were going to do was prepare some quiz-type questions. So what we'll do is I was supposed to prepare 5, and I prepared 8.
And I prepared none.
Okay, so between us, we're nearly there. Now, what we'll do is I'm going to give the audience a couple of seconds to try and answer, and then you get a chance to answer as well.
Okay, right. I'll keep quiet then for a little while, and then I'll come up with some questions while I'm thinking as well.
All right. Well, this one I know you know the answer to because we've already talked about it. But just for the listeners, which 2 films has he won Best Supporting Actor Oscars for? Okay, listeners, you ready? 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, Scott?
I'm going to say Hannah and the Sisters and Cider House Rules.
Very good, yes. 1986 and 1999. All right, here we go. A little bit more difficult. How many times has Michael Caine been nominated for the Best Actor Oscar? He hasn't won any, by the way, but how many times? Okay, listeners, you ready? Can't hear you. Okay, that's enough time.
Okay, Best Actor, not supporting actor.
An Oscar rather than BAFTA. I'm sure, I didn't check BAFTAs.
Do you know what? I don't think he has.
Doesn't he?
If he has, it's only once. I can't think.
I was thinking he must have won a BAFTA for Educating.
Yeah, BAFTA surely. He must have done. Yeah, surely. But I'm just thinking Oscars.
Go on, give us a number and then we'll
I want to say none, but then I'm thinking it might be 1 point he must have done. But I'm going to say 0. He hasn't been nominated for Best Actor Oscar.
Oh, no, 4.
Really?
Yes.
What were the 4?
All right, here we go. Alfie?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it was nominated for best.
Right.
And I was a bit surprised because I always think of that as so British.
Yeah, exactly.
It
yeah.
didn't travel, but apparently it did. Sleuth, because famously the entire cast were nominated for best actor, which was the two of them.
Remembered that, yeah.
But they lost. Who did they lose to that year? Can't think.
Can't remember. It was a very minor movie, wasn't it, that year? Yeah.
Some fella who didn't like his Oscar. Marlon Brando.
That's it. Mm.
Educating Rita again. Bit surprised. And what film based on a Graham Greene book did he get nominated for best actor? It wasn't The Honorary Consul.
I want to say Our Man in Havana, but it's not Our Man in Havana, is it? It's The Constant Gardener or something. Is that the one?
Quite American.
Quite American. That was it. I saw that at the cinema. I didn't like it.
Oh, really? Yeah. I saw it
not a big
once. Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, it didn't get my top 10, obviously, but it was bubbling under. He made a film called The Honorary Consul in the 80s, which was based on a Graham Greene.
That's the one I'm thinking
And
of.
one of Michael Caine's stories is years later, I think it was before The Quiet American, he met Graham Greene somewhere and was trying to avoid him because he was worried that Graham Greene had seen The Honorary Consul. So they got talking and Graham Greene said, yeah, I did see The Honorary Consul, Michael. I thought the film was terrible, but you were good. So there you go. And then I don't know if Michael Caine met him after The Quiet American. I don't know how long Graham Greene lived for, actually, but I felt with The Quiet American, it's probably a bit too obvious, but he was just a little bit too old. You could sort of believe it, but what was he? I think he was was that in the 2000s? I can't remember. Let's say he was about 70 maybe. Just a tiny bit too old. I'm not being ageist, but if he'd made it 5-10 years earlier, it probably would have got in my top 10. But
okay.
Anyway, so Alfie, Sleuth, Educating Rita in The Quiet American.
Mm.
Here we go. This is my silly question. In which film did Michael Caine famously not say, bloody hell, that's a big shark? Don't even answer that. That's one of the turkeys.
Top 5 for me, mate.
It's fully plausible that a shark would travel all the way from America to the Caribbean because one of his friends got shot by the chief of police. Yeah. So the shark family, they get together, they huddle, and they decide they're going to travel thousands of oceans to kill his wife. It's perfectly plausible.
Again, a perfect example of diminishing returns, that whole series of movies.
Yeah, definitely. This is an interesting one. You'll like this one. Which product or brand was the future Mrs. Caine, Shakira, advertising when Michael saw her on TV and thought, I'm going to marry that girl?
I've got an idea. Was it Maxwell House Coffee?
Give that man a cigar.
It
was.
Because he was in the flat with Terence Stamp at the time, wasn't he? And he did say, that's the girl I'm going to marry. And he sought her out, didn't he? Exactly. Yeah.
No, but the funny thing was, I think he found out she was, what was she doing? Modelling in somewhere very exotic. But then it turned out she lived a few miles down the road.
She lived in Earl's Court or somewhere, didn't she? I think it was.
Like
yeah.
Good story. All right, I think you know this one. What family secret was revealed to Michael Caine in the early 90s? Listeners, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No, not quick enough. Okay.
He had a brother that he was unaware of that was in a care home. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. Was it half-brother?
It was in a care home, wasn't he?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But the incredible thing is that the mother visited this boy every Monday for 40 years without telling anybody.
Nobody knew.
Yeah, nobody knew. All those decades, 30, 40 years. I think the only time she didn't visit was when Michael persuaded her to come to America on holiday, because Michael was it maybe in Hollywood or around that area?
Yeah, he was, yeah. Great story. And he supported him right up until he died, didn't he, apparently?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. All right, this is a good one. This one, I think you're going to know this. Which director has Michael Caine made the most films with?
Nolan?
Yeah, definitely Nolan. 7 films.
Which is one of my questions coming up in a second.
How was it? Christopher Nolan was my answer. He's made 2 with the following directors. This is Lewis Gilbert.
Lewis Gilbert, famous sort of Ealing director, wasn't he, Gilbert?
We made Alfie, and he made... Lewis Gilbert was Educating Rita.
Oh, of course it was, because that was, big comeback for Lewis Gilbert, because I think he also did Fish Called Wanda, didn't he, Lewis Gilbert? Or was that Charles Crichton?
That's Charles Crichton, yeah.
Yeah, I always get those two mixed up.
Guy Hamilton, Mike Hodges, Erwin Allen, we'll definitely be mentioning those.
I was going to mention Erwin Allen as well in the quiz, but I'll leave that because he needs to be spoken about.
And John Huston, which 2 films did he make?
Man Who Would Be King.
Yep.
I can't remember the other one. What's the other one? Escape to Victory.
Escape to Victory, which I was going to ask you this later, I can never work out if it's actually a good film or just so bad it's good. I can never work that out.
What, Escape to Victory?
Yeah, is it actually a good film, or is it kind of...
To me,
yeah.
yes.
You think it's a good film? All right, yeah.
Because it involves dozens of football legends. I'm not sure, you're not a massive football fan, are you? You're more boxing,
I used to be a football fan, definitely in that era. What I remember about it was obviously Stallone's in goal, and if you watch any Rocky films, whenever he gets punched, he always goes, "Hurrah!" That's his standard grunt, right? And then what you see in the film is that he's kind of going, "Hurrah!" as he's diving to the ball. Michael Caine's basically playing a sort of Bobby Moore, isn't he? But the weird thing is that Bobby Moore's there as
he's
well.
in the film, yeah.
But obviously the great bit is when he's talking about tactics and Pele just takes the chalk and says...
This especially applies to wingers. If you can't cross, don't run it through. Try and get a corner. A set piece works in our favour, which means that as they...
Give me this. Go. After giving me ball, here I do these. Go. Easy.
Anyway, that wasn't in my top 10. But final one. In which year was Michael Caine knighted?
2002.
Oh, close. 2000. Pretty good. Catchphrases. We've already talked about this. What about parodies? What's your favourite Michael Caine parody?
We could go on for hours about The Trip.
I love The Trip.
But you got Michael Caine, the nosy neighbour from the Fast Show.
Yeah. I can do an impression because this is Paul White. My name is Michael Caine and I am a nosy neighbour. Just this idea of Michael Caine peering through the curtains. It's Paul Whitehouse.
Yeah, the Brazilian lady who lives directly opposite.
That's it, yeah.
My name is Michael Caine and I am a nosy neighbour. Now, the Brazilian beauty who lives diagonally opposite but one has an inordinate amount of gentlemen callers. The other day, I couldn't help but notice that she went out without double locking her front door. For me, a 3-lever latch is the work of an instant. I use a Safeway's added bonus card. Do you see? A, B, C. Added bonus card. It's child's play. But I digress. Having gained access to her home, I was able to secrete myself under the floorboards in her bedroom. And by means of a small drilled hole, I had the perfect opportunity to witness her antics over the next 4 days. Do you know what I deduced from my observations? I deduced that she'd gone on bloody holiday. I was very glad to get home. Not a lot of people know how bloody glad I was to get home, but I bloody well was. Bloody glad. Oh, yes.
In a way, he became a parody of himself for a while. He played up on that. We played the clip, didn't we, on Parkinson, where he said, like, people that do impressions of me make me sound like this, makes me sound like a bloody idiot, you know. And it is, everybody does that. And Coogan and Brydon get it perfectly because they said it's not that old exaggerated thing. It's very subdued. It's very, the voice is deeper. And they do the whole line about she was only 16 years old. Yeah, well, I'll play a bit. Let's play the clip of Coogan and Brydon having a sort of Caine off, if you know what I mean, comparing. So we'll play that now.
Well, broadsheet journalists have described my impressions as stunningly accurate.
Well, they're wrong. I've not heard your Michael Caine, but I assume it would be something along the lines of, my name's Michael Caine.
That is where you are so wrong. And you can look at my live video for proof, because that's the very thing I don't do. I say that he used to talk like that.
Do you Michael Caine?
OK. I say Michael Caine used to talk like this in the 1960s, right? But that has changed. And I say that over the years, Michael's voice has come down several octaves. Let me finish. And all of the cigars and the brandy, don't let me finish, can now be heard.
OK.
I've not fucking finished. In the back of the voice, and the voice now. I've still not finished. The voice.
Because you're panicking.
Because you look like you're about to bloody talk. Let me finish. Right, so, Michael Caine's voice now, in the Batman movies and in Harry Brown. I can't go fast because Michael Caine talks very, very slowly.
Right, this is how Michael Caine speaks. Michael Caine speaks to his nose like that. He gets very, very specific. It's very like that. When he gets loudly, it gets very loud indeed. It gets very specific. It's not quite nasal enough the way you're doing it, all right? You're not doing it the way he speaks. You're not doing it with the kind of And you don't do the broken voice when he gets very emotional. When he gets very emotional indeed. She was only 16 years old. She was only 16. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. That's Michael Caine.
I'm pretty sure she was only 16 years old is Get Carter, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not in the finished film because I watched it. Because obviously it's his niece, isn't it? His brother's daughter gets...
Or is it Mona Lisa then? Is it Mona Lisa? Because there's Sammy What's-Her-Face in Mona Lisa, the young prostitute.
Maybe.
It might be that.
Again, listeners, please feel free to put something in the comments. I know I even looked online and nobody could agree. They said it was a deleted scene from Get Carter, which would make sense because his niece is in a porn film. But yeah, you could be right. I don't know about that. I honestly don't know.
It may be one of those ones like Play It Again, Sam, that just never happened.
But there's another great clip. I think rather than playing the audio, I'll put this in the show notes. Mm-hmm. Have you seen in 2014 the tribute when Coogan and Bryden are sitting on a balcony and they've got microphones so everyone in the auditorium can hear? And they start having a conversation. Oh, this is really good, isn't it? I'm really looking forward to this. And they go, tonight is to honour one man. They start, they basically have the argument they have on the trip where they said, when Michael was young, he talked like this, but over the years, with the brandy and the cigars, it's all that kind of thing. You don't do the broken voice when he gets very emotional. And then Mike, what it is that you see in the background someone reading a program, and then he takes it away, and it's Michael himself.
Oh, brilliant! No, I haven't seen that. I'll have to.
And then you'll know what this is a reference to. Coogan asked the important question: did you kill Alf Roberts? So what's that a reference to?
That's Get Carter, isn't it? Throws Brian Moseley from the multi-story car park in Gateshead, I think.
That's it. Isn't it? Yeah. Again, for the overseas listeners, there was a soap opera called Coronation Street, which is still going.
60 plus years later, yeah.
Yeah. 1960 it started. And Brian Moseley played a shopkeeper called Alf Roberts. So the idea that, Michael Caine would kill the man who played Alf Roberts, obviously years earlier. So that was the immortal thing. We also got Stella Street. Is that Phil Cornwell?
It is Phil Cornwell in Stella Street, yes. Because wasn't John Sessions in that as well, Stella Street?
Maybe, yeah. I thought it was Dead Ringers, but it's not, no.
No, but then again, I bet Michael Caine has been parodied on Dead Ringers, mate, at some point.
Yeah. The other thing he said in that Parkinson thing was that they use him for sat-navs, don't they?
Yes, and you said to me, you are desperate to get a sat-nav from Michael Caine, aren't you now?
I think I will, yeah, because it will cheer me up while I'm driving,
Totally.
If I'm driving to something depressing like a job,
That'd be brilliant because there's that line in The Man Who Would Be King where he says, "You are not going to go in front of them. You are not going to go behind them. You're going to go bloody with them." Something like that.
You're not going to turn right.
Yeah,
you're not going to turn left. You're going to go straight. And you're not going to overtake. It's a single carriageway.
What's the one in the Italian job? He says, "You're not sitting in the front and you're not getting an headache, so shut up." We said towards the second half we'd start dipping into the bloody voices, didn't we, unfortunately? So yeah.
But we won't do the most obvious one because instead we'll play the clip from the Italian job. You ready? Here we go, listeners.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
Right, at this point, this is obviously going to be very long, and we need it to be long to do the great man some justice. So I think we're going to call this the end of part 1. We will be back in about 30 seconds to record part 2. I'm pretty confident part 1 will come out before Michael's birthday. Part 2 may not. We'll see how that goes. But if you're listening to part 1 as you are now, this will be the end of that. So what about the list so far, Scott? Would you like to tantalise us with what could be in your top 5?
Well, if you've been paying attention to 10 to 6...
I haven't been paying attention. So
there are some still big movies to come.
Yes.
One of which is one of yours. Anyway, we've already mentioned. The Italian Job is in my top 5 then, obviously. Yes. But there's 4 other movies yet to mention, and I would say there's only 2 of them are in the 60s left as well. That's all I'll say.
All right, okay. All right, everybody, thank you very much for listening, and we will be back very soon for part 2. Goodbye for now.
Take care. Bye-bye.